Well, it's perfect timing because right as Jack McMullen arrives in Jupiter to go see Marlins camp, we're talking Marlins top prospects here on the call up. I'm Aram. He's Jack. The prospects aren't down there yet, right? You got a few. You got the NRIs, but
my knuckle bump with Caba today would beg to differ,
there?
man. Yeah, we're all there. Dillon Head I saw earlier today. They're all here, man.
I'm excited. I'm going to try to get out there tomorrow. Most people are probably listening to this, and it's today. I want to get out there on Wednesday. I was thinking the way we do this episode is I'll say all the reasons why these guys will be successful in the major leagues, and then you say all the reasons why they won't.
Yeah, I think that's good, and I shouldn't base mine on data whatsoever. I should just go like, my gut feel is that no, here's how we're going to do this episode. This is actually the one article that I've had literally zero to do with. So I'm using this as prep for me, where I'm just going to ask follow-ups, and you need to tell me why these guys are going to be awesome.
Well, this is the fun part because, through your job during the regular season, as you're calling games for the big league team, you're going to be as tapped in as possible on the minor league side of things. One, because you have that natural interest, but two, because the system has gotten so much better. There's a lot of reinforcements on the way. And I know you're excited about the coverage that you and Steven Strom are going to be kind of providing and updating folks and Marlins fans on what's going on in the minor leagues. So it's fun for me to be able to kind of provide a little bit of a primer here on, all of the Marlins top prospects. We talked about them. We talked about the system towards the back half of last season. But since then, they've acquired several more prospects. We saw a little bit more from several guys. We saw some pitchers finish strong. So there's already so many more things to follow up on. And I'm excited, man. It doesn't quite have the same level of top-end talent, maybe. If you're talking about, if you're ranking a system off of top 100 guys, It's not going to be up there with the Brewers just yet or the Rays or whatever. But in terms of depth, this Marlins system now is as deep as I can remember it. And I think about what Peter Bendix has said about kind of the layers or waves of talent and how that's been a focus for them. And you can kind of see that now where the lower levels have, plenty of talent stockpiling there. You've got some guys that are going to be in high A, double A, and then that Jacksonville team is going to be really, really fun as well. So you can see those layers or waves of talent that are going to hopefully help the Marlins be competitive for the foreseeable future. But this system, in the last year and a half, I think since 2024, I checked, since the start of 2024, 12 of the Marlins top 15 prospects for us here were acquired. Whether that be draft, most of them were via trade. I understand that that's what happens when you trade players away at the big league level, but it's not like they moved Sandy or, moved Yuri Perez, right? They moved guys that, are solid big leaguers, but aren't necessarily going to command Juan Soto returns. And they've turned this farm system from what was one of baseball's worst to, I think one that's very close to the top 10.
And this is not accounting for young big leaguers, Kyle Stowers, Connor Norby. I'm thinking about all these guys, it is accounting for Mazur, but Stowers and Norby is a big one. They got him for Trevor Rogers, a guy that was optioned. Matt Mervis, same deal. This has been really impressive. So you think about the young big league pieces, and then you also think about, well, I know Pipeline 17 to the top 30, but obviously it's littered across the top 15 and then littered in the names to watch as well. There are newcomers, man, newcomers galore.
We're not going to change the cadence here because I still like you doing the names to watch so you can talk about them, or do you want me to walk through them and you follow up with a question?
I want to follow up with a question because I didn't write the names to watch. I typically write the names to watch. I didn't do it this go around. Again, this is just prep for me.
I had fun doing the names to watch. So, well, it's alphabetical, of course, as always, but Eshedri Vargas is the first name to watch here. And of course, as always, follow along with the link in the episode description on YouTube. You're already following along. Vargas, shortstop, acquired alongside Max Acosta and Brian Mendoza in that Jake Berger deal. And we're going to talk about Max Acosta. You'll see some people say Vargas was the headliner. You'll see some people say Acosta was the headliner. Clearly, I think Acosta is the headliner. I'll explain why and lay out my case. It's not as much of an indictment on Vargas as it is credit to Acosta, but Vargas, he's a guy that can pull the ball in the air at a really high clip. And, that's something that, the analytics community started to put a lot of value into, right? Is how often are you pulling the ball in the air? Literally air pull percentage is something that you're looking at. That's allowed him to outslug the exit velocities. And, even though the exit velocities are fringy for his age and his level, even as a guy that was 19 last year, he was able to tap into some power because of the ability to lift there. My concern is the chase rate's over 40% this past year. That's going to have to cut down. That's one of the higher marks in minor league baseball. And the contact rates are fine, but not good enough to be able to offset that. He does look like he can play shortstop, and he can run a little bit too. So definitely a great piece to get, but you're looking at him right now, and it's really hard to project approach. But if he can cut down on that chase rate, if it's more of just a hyper aggressive thing than a pitch rec thing, then you could see Vargas absolutely, take a huge step this coming year. And it still was a really good season from him.
We're going to get into the Deyvison De Los Santos conversation in a little bit, but are they similar points on the scatter plot to Deyvison, where you've got the high chase rate? And you mentioned the contact rates are fine, but not great.
It's a little bit less chase, a little bit more contact. The difference is Deyvison De Los Santos hits the ball
40 home runs
per hour. But there's a little bit more pressure for a guy when the EVs are lower to jack up those contact rates even more. So he's got time, and that's the good thing. Like, he'll be 20 years old for the entirety of the season. But, as a player of his archetype, especially if you're a pull the ball in the air guy, approach is a big part of that, right? We talk about Isaac Paredes, and like, he's very committed to his approach and hunting pitches in the zone to be able to do what he does best. If you're chasing at a 40% clip, pitchers are going to kind of force you to not be able to do what you do best. If you're chasing stuff running away from you, how are you going to be able to pull the ball in the air to the clip that you can? You got to be almost okay going down looking sometimes if you're going to commit to being a guy that's pulling the ball in the air at a high clip. So that's the thing to monitor. But as what I think the second piece in the deal, and a guy that can potentially stick it short, I thought he was a good get.
Gotcha.
Andres Valor, another lower level guy, complex will be at this year, or might actually get a little bit of a look in low A. I'm interested to see how they go about it, whether he repeats at the Florida complex or starts at low A. But Valor is another guy. They have a couple of these guys at the lower levels that can play a solid center field, can run, and put together a decent season this past year. It's just kind of waiting to see what the standout tool is going to be. He crushed fastballs. Contact rate dropped to 54% against secondaries, or specifically spin. But there's a guy that could stick in center field, can potentially provide, gap-to-gap power with 10 or so home runs, and can run a little bit. So a solid prospect, but again, kind of waiting to see him tap into maybe a little bit more power.
We were impressed when we got to the backfields last year with his physicality. Like, he was much bigger than you would typically expect from a teenager. Apparently he's bigger this year. So I'm excited to get a look at him.
That would be huge, because like, the contact rates are fine. And if he can improve against breaking balls, then maybe he can track closer to average or above average in that department. But if he's putting together above average, exit velocities, then that takes a lot of pressure off the hit tool, especially when he can play center field.
Yep.
A guy that I know you've seen a good bit of, and he's just a fun AB to watch. Javier Sanoja checks in next, and I put utility because he's going to probably play all over for the Marlins this coming season. But Sanoja, he's the best bat to ball guy in the Marlins system. And, I think pretty comfortably. I think it was 93% in zone contact. But what makes him so impressive to me is also the out of zone contact, where he ran an 82% contact rate outside of the zone. That gave him a 90% overall contact rate. That is one of the higher figures you're going to see in Major League Baseball. And even in his MLB stint, it didn't really drop much at all. He's probably best at second base, but he can fill in at shortstop when you need, and he can fill in center field when you need. I think he's the perfect utility piece that's contact oriented, grinds out ABs. And, if you put him in off the bench against the closer, he's going to see pitches and he's going to give you a good at bat.
Clayton McCullough's media availability this morning, the new Marlins manager, he said Sanoja's going to own a lot of gloves, which is funny. Like, all right, I can see it, because everything that I saw in Jacksonville was like, not only can you play a good short or second, you can play a good center. Like, he's gonna play everywhere that it feels like is valuable.
Yes, and it's like picking up where Birdie left off with potentially more defensive value. You hope the bat can be as valuable as the good Birdie stretches.
Yeah,
but even if he's close to league average, with all the other things that he brings to the table and just the grinding out of at bats, that's the exact kind of guy you want off the bench.
Yep.
Abraham Ramirez is the next name. Also played at the complex. He was the third piece in that Jazz Chisholm return. The numbers were ridiculous for Ramirez, who is the second baseman, by the way. He's played a little short. I think ultimately second base is going to be his home. I want to see him do it at low A, and that's what's going to be the test for him. but I do think he has the ingredients to be a table setter at second base. It's, a nice left-handed swing. I don't think there's a ton of projection there. It's going to be hit over power, and the contact rates were average. So you want to see that. But I think what really helps him and elevates his profile, 16% chase rate this past year. That allowed him to walk as much as he struck out. And I think there's enough impact to be gap to gap there if he can improve against spin. This is a guy that could be, a solid everyday second baseman if it all works out. He'll be 20 years old, and we'll get the assignment to low A, which it's not just the top end guys that get me excited about low A. It's also the fact that, a lot of times when you're watching low A games, there's a couple guys of intrigue, and then it drops off a cliff, right?
Then
you
be 1 through 9
guys.
Yeah.
Even an Abraham Ramirez is someone that's like, wow, through that entire lineup, at least there's some intrigue here from a prospect perspective.
Yeah, we talk about it coming in waves, and he's part of that younger wave.
Yep. And as a third piece, Agustin Ramirez coming along, Jared Serna, who we're going to talk about as well. Not a bad third piece to have. And it's funny, they kind of fit that wave too, where you have a guy that was mostly in Double A, a guy that was in Triple A, and then a guy that's going to be in Low A this coming season.
Yep.
Jose Paulino. I don't know if he was out there throwing yet, but if he has made it over stateside, this is a guy that will be fun to watch on the backfield. It'll be one of those situations where you hear the glove pop and you just go right over there and go see, well, where did that come from? And it's just some teenage kid that just came over from the Dominican Summer League. And you're like, whoa, I got to pay attention to this guy. That's exactly what he can do here, where you have a 6'2", 160, 70-pound righty who averaged 96 miles per hour in his age 17 season. He's still learning how to pitch, but it's pretty low effort for a pitch that can get up to 99. And, if he can find the feel for the breaking ball and everything like that, obviously he could be a rocket ship, but just sheer arm talent alone makes him a name to watch.
A phenomenal fit on International Signing Day when the IFA period opened. I just texted you a photo of his fit. White suit, light blue vest. It was a perfect outfit.
I'm looking at it right now. Wow.
Yeah, good.
That is clean. I love that.
Good.
All right.
He's got it on.
He's definitely a name to watch. Graham Pauley also checks in here. Another prospect the Marlins acquired. He was in the Tanner Scott deal, and Brian Hoeing, I should say, very underrated. That Hoeing was actually a good get for the Padres there. We always talk about how Tanner Scott was the rental. I don't think you get the Pauleys and the other pieces in the deal unless you attach Brian Hoeing. 13th round pick in 2022. We know Pauley broke out and had the huge year that he had in 2023. 23 home runs across low A, high A, double A. That's a 152 WRC plus. Then he performed in the fall league pretty well, and I had some impressive swings there. Then he got rushed to the big leagues straight from Double A, essentially. And it wasn't even just straight from Double A. It was after playing like 20 games in Double A. And he was like pinch hitting and getting put in these tough spots. And then they sent him back to Triple A, and he struggled. But he had kind of skipped Double A. And I know it was the PCL, but the pitchers are still the Triple A pitchers. So the way I looked at it, and people were kind of surprised when Pauley got assigned to Double A, he needed to have his development recalibrated. And that's exactly what the Marlins did. He started to settle back in again, put up above average numbers in the Southern League, and then he's going to play this year in AAA and hopefully rebuild that momentum that he had built that made him kind of the breakout prospect, I think, in 2023, or at least one of. So he's a guy that is also going to be the outslug, the exit velocities type, but it's a really nice swing from the left side, and he proved that he could do that in any environment and get the ball up. There's enough power to be able to do it. And I think you provide some versatility. He can play second. He can play third. The Padres ran him out at first and left field a little bit.
Yep.
I do think he could be that bat first utility type.
We're going to talk about Snelling as well, but I feel so bad for these Padres farmhands that aren't at the tippy top. And even the guys at the tippy top where it's like they're going too fast for their own good through the minor league system. It just really doesn't make much sense to me the way the Padres push their prospects.
Yeah. I mean, it works out when it works out. But it also
it didn't work out for Abrams. It didn't work out for even a guy Ryan Weathers, if you're listening to this, right?
Yeah.
It didn't work out for Weathers in San Diego. It didn't work out for Tucupita Marcano. I know a couple other things didn't work out for Tucupita Marcano, but there are a lot of examples like that in San Diego, man.
Yeah, that was a gamble with Marcano. But the interesting thing is if it doesn't work out, then they just pivot and move those guys. That's always the fascinating thing. It's if you can't swim immediately at the big league level and B. Jackson Merrill, we'll package you. And that's why they're kind of stuck sometimes.
Yeah.
Victor Mesa Jr. was off to a really good start. And I think it gets underrated as to what he was doing last year before a back issue cut his season short. But it wasn't just the fact that it cut it short. He tried to play through it for a while, and it really weighed down his numbers. But up until that point, he was actually performing at an above average clip at AAA as a player that's young for that level. He's got plenty of time. So I think Mesa is a guy that's become kind of forgotten. He was 22 years old in AAA. He has a high floor because he can go get it in center field, at least in an average, I think an above average clip. He's got to cut down on the chase, and he's got to improve his ability to hit against velocity. Just even some of the feedback I got from the Marlins was like, do you think it's a bat speed thing or do you think it's a mechanical thing? And they feel it's more the latter, which is more encouraging, where he can get very counter rotated. It's just hard to get the barrel back out in time for velocity. So if he can hit fastballs, he'll be in a great spot because this guy demolished sliders. 901 OPS this past season against sliders. That's the harder part to teach. He's reverse splits right now is weird, but I think velocity was a big part of that, where he had an 872 OPS against lefties and a 677 against righties. But getting healthy and building off of that, he still has a chance to be, I think, a second division regular in center. But I love his chances of at least being a fourth outfielder.
Yeah, man. I mean, he was fluid out there. He's clearly an athlete, and I'm excited to see what a healthy Mesa looks like.
Yeah, and again, I think he was really trying to grit and bear it and push through that, and that's why you saw those numbers, take a hit as the season progressed. Yeah. We've yet to see Aiden May, right-hander who just got drafted 78th overall in the 2024 draft. I think he was dealing just with like some little nagging things that the Marlins said, hey, we'll see you in 25. And I think hopefully it will be ready to go. But he has some unique stuff that I'm excited to see how the Marlins can potentially, squeeze every drop out there, where the slider is a plus pitch or close to it. And then you have a heavy fastball working off of that. So you can already imagine the horizontal separation there. He's going to get ground balls. And then he's also mixed in a splitter that flashes. So that gives you the vertical operation as well. You can get ground balls. You can get some whiff. This guy could be a really solid back end innings eater. And, with the 70th overall selection, I thought an underslot, I thought that was a nice get by the Marlins. I'm excited to see his debut. He could be a guy that climbs quickly, even if the ceiling isn't extraordinarily high.
Heavy fastballs work, man. I mean, the Marlins have a Cy Young Award winner on their roster from rolling ground balls in an 0-1 count. So I'm not saying that, but it could work.
Absolutely. And again, hopefully he's ready to go and everything, but that is a guy that I think they could end up pushing relatively aggressively.
Yeah.
Jacob Marcy, another guy that was acquired from the Padres, but that was in the Arias deal. We loved him when we saw him in the fall league. And how couldn't you? He was the performer in the fall league. And it was crazy to watch what he could do. He's a very unique case because his average exit velocity is quite low, but his air exit velocity is like 4 ticks higher, which is generally going to be a discrepancy there, but not normally that big. So he's going to be a guy where the underlying batted ball data is always going to be bizarre and like hard to fully get a true idea on. What I can say though is he was one of those guys that in the Southern League, the numbers like looked worse than they were slash line wise. He's going to walk at a great clip. He's going to play an above average center field. He's going to be a menace on the base paths, which I know you love. And he's just gritty and does all the little things. Again, another guy that has, I think, the floor of a fourth outfielder, and I think has the potential to be a bulk platoon outfielder who can move all over. You're probably not going to want him to face lefties too much, but he was a guy that I think had as big of a difference between his WOBA and his ex-WOBA. And I don't put a ton of stock into minor league ex-WOBA, but like if there's a big discrepancy, I think you can look at that as really any in the Marlins organization. So he's a guy that should get up this coming season, and I think has a great chance to provide value in some sort of big league role. But I think you can still dream on the bat coming along a little bit more, enough of the sneaky pull side pop and walk ability to be a bulk platoon guy who can give you value in center and a ton of value on the base paths.
401 plate appearances for Jacob Marcy with Pensacola, 91 games, 188 with a 303 slug, a 103 WRC plus.
That place
like that's crazy, man. I feel so bad for Southern League hitters too. It's guys that coming up in the Padres system and then Southern League hitters.
And poor Marcy and Martorella had to do both. And Martorella didn't quite make the names to watch, but he was right there. Finished the season really strong once he got to AAA and got the hell out of the Southern League too. Yeah. And I still think Martorella could be a solid big league bat.
Yeah.
Dax Fulton, I'm rooting for as hard as anybody in this system. Not just because we had him on the show and he's an awesome dude, but because he's super talented and injuries have just gotten in the way, right? When the Marlins drafted the 6'7" lefty in the second round in 2020, he was already on the back end of recovering from Tommy John surgery, and then he had to undergo another elbow surgery last year, which, wiped out the entire season. Before that, we started to see the fastball creep up to the mid-90s. He's got an absolute banger of a curveball, and he was working on a changeup that flashed like it could be a decent third pitch. I don't know what the Marlins' plan is. I'm sure that they're going to take their time with him to a degree to work him back, but at the same time, they had to add him to the 40-man roster. And, as much as they probably love to see him as a starter, I do wonder if they expedite the process here and potentially look at him as a guy that could get there first as a reliever, and then if they want to transition him back in, they do. That's just purely conjecture on my end, but I'm looking at a 6'6", 6'7" lefty who could probably run it up to the mid to upper 90s in single inning spurts, assuming he's 100% ready to go. With that banger curveball, like he could be helping the big league team quite soon, but I could also understand the Marlins wanting to take their time and develop him as a starter because he's so talented.
He was I don't have it in front of me. He was at 0 innings pitched in 2024. So you assume there's like a little bit of a ramp up there in 25.
Yeah. I mean, he hasn't thrown since May of 23.
Yeah. So you would assume a ramp up, like probably controlled starts, right? Like, I don't know, 2-3 inning spurts or so.
Especially after a second elbow. That's one thing I'm eager to just kind of hear what the Marlins plan is with him. And I'm sure it'll be touch and feel, but like the good fallback here with him. And he's already on the 40. Like I said, that this stuff would play out of the pen and it could play quite well out of the pen. Yeah. Speaking of the pen, this guy's stuff is already playing quite well out of the pen. Josh Eknes, he was drafted in the 13th round. He was a starter in college. And the Marlins immediately said, we're going to move you to the pen, but we're going to still use you in multi-inning spurts. And it was wild watching the stuff. I think so. He was at Lamar in 22 and then Houston in 23. The ERA was not great at either spot. Yeah. But in shorter spurts this past year, his fastball averaged 97.5. But as the year progressed, he was throwing harder and harder and harder. Over his final 15 starts, I think he averaged 98 or 15 appearances, excuse me. Fastball's got life. Then you have a nasty breaking ball off of that. And what I like is he's got 4-seamer, 2-seamer, and they're both at 98. He can buzz it at the top, run it at the bottom. And then that mid-80s sweeper that's getting, an opponent batting average of around 100. Wow. That's just ridiculous stuff. But what I love is it wasn't just here and there 2-inning appearances. He was doing them like pretty consistently. So this is a guy that could be in like that Justin Slayton type of role if it works out, where you put him in after maybe a little bit of a shorter start than you wanted, and he can give you like the 5th and the 6th and just absolutely carve, or you can put him in a single inning in the 7th or 8th and go about it that way too. But he was playing plenty at like 1 to 2 inning spurts, and the velocity was holding up. He, I think, had a stretch of, I'm looking at it right now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 9 out of 10 appearances consecutively. So 9 out of 10 in a stretch, he went at least 2 innings. And through that stretch, his fastball averaged 98. So this guy can handle a decent workload. Yeah, interesting. Now, okay, overall philosophy question for you. 2 fastball shapes, 4-seam and 2-seam. Would you consider what he has a 3-pitch mix or like 2, 2.5? 3. I do. I consider it 3 because you can really do totally different things off of him. And it's funny you mentioned that because like we only put like 1 fastball grade even on the table. Right. But when you see the usage shifts with the sinker and the 4-seamer, like versus handedness, I'm like, you got to look at it as 2 different pitches at that point then too. I would like to see a little bit more separation with him. Like it's kind of like the Charlie Soto conversation we were having where, it's like only 5 inches of difference horizontal and vertical both ways. And if he can get a little bit more difference there, it'll help. But at the same time, like I think with the way that he throws, it's still able to do what it needs to do, where the 4-seamer got like a 34% ground ball rate, which is great because you want to get big whiff at the top of the zone, which he did. And then the sinker, I think it yielded like near 70-something% ground ball rate. So to me, those were 2 different pitches. Yeah, and I side with you there because I feel like if you deploy them differently to different handed hitters or different templates of hitters, say big power guy excels at the top of the zone or, excels bottom of the zone. If you change your arsenal and you view those as 2 unique things, that's probably a 3-pitch mix. If it's 2 fastballs and a sweeper. And if you have a 40% difference in ground ball rate. Yeah, that's different. Yeah, it's pretty different. But he might be one of the guys that could be in the bullpen by the end of the year or middle of the year, just because like why waste the bullets? He finished the year in Double A, and his final outing of the year, by the way, averaged 99.2. So again, was throwing harder and harder and harder as the year progressed.
Damn.
Last name to watch, the guy that might have been the final on the chopping block of the top 15, Kiner Benitez, and I think he could very easily be in the top 15. Left-hander, was just 18 years old this past season and turned in a great season at low A. 3.12 ERA and 57 2/3. The reason why he didn't quite get in there is just wanted to see a little bit more stuff. I get it, he's 18, but you want to kind of wait and see what else is in there. I don't know if there's as much room for projection maybe as some of the other top performers, teenage performers in low A, but this guy can pitch. And I think there's a decent chance that he could be a back end of the rotation starter. Maybe he makes a leap velocity wise and can track, a little bit better.
Yeah.
Does have a good feel for the changeup, which I think is his best pitch. That pitch looks like it can flash plus. Fastball average 92.5. He needs a breaking ball. Like he's still trying to find that. Like the curveball just wasn't consistently there for him. So those are the things that just kind of held him back for me a bit. But he's 18, so it's hard to like really nitpick those things. And the fact that he had the pitch ability to turn in solid numbers as an 18-year-old in low A, I think has to be really encouraging if you're a Marlins fan. And he's a guy that I think could get pushed pretty quickly if he can just find a little bit more stuff-wise and just find a little bit more of the field to spin it.
Yeah, man. I mean, listen, a 2.71 ERA and 69 2/3 innings, like that's flat out awesome. And the fact that, obviously he was in the Dominican Summer League in 23, but then in 24, he threw 12 innings of the complex and they said, okay, that's enough. You're good. Like 12 innings, 19 Ks, 2 walks. That's a guy that clearly has a big league caliber pitch in that changeup. And I mean, like, again, like you say, okay, there might be a struggle to turn the hand the other way. He's 18 years old.
He's 18, exactly. So there's time. I could have aggressively just thrown him in the top 15 and said,
based on a projection,
so when he's great, but we're going to get into the top 15. It's just guys that are close and doing it. And I just think you're going to put a little bit more value to those guys. But again, I would not be shocked at all if by the time we talk in May, Kiner Benitez is sitting 93.5 now, and holy crap,
and he's finding a little like baby cut slider. Yeah,
exactly. But we also, you can remember like Luis Palacios, who I'm not comparing him to him because he's got a little bit more going for him already. But it's like, oh wow, he's already here. Imagine what he could be, and then he was just the same thing the whole time. The difference is Benitez has a little bit more velocity already going for him.
Yeah.
We're going to get into the top 15, which starts with Deyvison De Los Santos, which was apparently a very big surprise to a lot of Marlins fans. But before that, our first break. All right, Jack, I need your expert analysis here. I know I'm supposed to lead the way, but I'm going to let you lead the way here. The height weight there. You saw Deyvison today. He's not 5'11", 190, right?
No, he probably shrunk an inch or two to 5'10", 5'9", and it seems like he's slimmed out maybe to 150, 160 pounds. So I'd probably put him at 5'10", 155. He's a big man, very big man. Guesstimate 6'1", 220. Like that's probably what I would ballpark.
Yeah. So, people were like, oh, no way he's 5'11", 190. I agree.
Correct.
No matter where you look, the height and weight haven't been updated. And I'm not going to just guess a dude's height and weight. I'm just going to take whatever. If MLB.com has it and that's the best access I have, I'm just going to do that. I'm not going to guess a dude's height and weight because I don't want to be rude, offensive, or undershoot it. Like I'm just going to go. And I already tacked on like 5 pounds, I think, from what MLB had, just to put it a little closer so that if anybody says, whoa, you're way off, I'll say closer than MLB. But the real reason we're talking about Deyvison De Los Santos is he has 70 great power. And that was clear. He hit 40 home runs this past year. You could talk about the environments. He did hit in 2 of the most hitter-friendly environments in Reno and Amarillo. It does not matter. He can leave any yard. The challenge is, will he allow himself to contact-wise and approach-wise? The good news is he's very young. The frustrating part for me is, I think it was communicated to him, after he was traded that, hey, welcome to the Marlins. You should probably chase less. And it just seemed like it was hard for him to do that. And, there's the sides of it where swing decisions are because you're rushed and you're aggressive or because you're just aggressive and you're aggressive. And I think for De Los Santos, it was a little bit of both, but just seeing that chase rate climb down the stretch of the season was a little bit of it was a little discouraging for me personally, just because you want to see that trend in the other direction. At the same time, how do you tell a guy like Deyvison De Los Santos, who, up until those final 30 games that, I'm citing here, was hitting 300 with 30 plus bombs to swing last? It's like the Pete Crow Armstrong conversation that we used to have. Like PCA was hitting 300 everywhere he goes. How do you convince a guy that's hitting 300 to swing less? It's hard. So I'm hoping that that's the case. Obviously, this entire offseason, and I'd imagine that any conversation De Los Santos has with the Marlins coaches and officials, it's, what do I need to do to get there? Approach. Like the contact rates aren't a huge problem. You can be a 35 grade hitter with 70 power and carve out a 15-year big league career, no problem, as a first baseman. But you can't also have 30 grade plate discipline. So that's the big thing to monitor with him. On the positive side, this guy can leave any yard to all fields too. That's what I love. It's all fields. So the ball kind of flies to right in Lone Depot. He'll go backside plenty. He'll miss hit balls that'll leave to the pull side. I know the Marlins are still mixing in some reps at third. I don't think he's great there, but he can actually play a solid first base. He can actually. We were talking about, like, we need like a picks plus stat. This is a very valuable part of first base that doesn't get measured. He can pick quite well, but the chase rate's got to go down from 42%, and it unfortunately went up over 50% over the final 30 games of the season. Yeah,
what a huge statement from him, though, after the whole Rule 5 thing. Like, Guardians took him in the Rule 5, returned him after Big League Spring. He just looked overmatched, and he hits 40 homers. I feel like that is the underrated part of his 2024 season, where not only did he hit 40 homers, it came after that. It came after the high of being selected, looking like you're going to be on an opening day roster, and then being returned to the team that you were taken from in the Rule 5 draft. So, like, huge statement from him, but I'm curious to see what it looks like too. And I wonder how much of that is like, okay, he was there. He was so close. He hit his point to the doorstep of the big leagues. Maybe he was like, I'm going to swing my way there. 3 more homers and I'm there. And obviously that's not how it works. But, part of me is thinking, like, could that have been the thought process?
He was 21 years old and he turned 21 just before the All-Star break. So that wouldn't surprise me at all. Like, it's not, I'm not expecting a 20-year-old, 21-year-old slugger to be like, okay, I'm on pace for 40, but if I want to get to the show,
I'm going to cool it down, start walking.
I got to slow it down a little bit. So this is one where I could absolutely be way too low, because he shows up this year, knows what he needs to do to get that final step forward. And all of a sudden he's chasing he doesn't need to chase at a 20% clip. If he's at a 30% clip, I think all of a sudden he unlocks a lot. I think for better or for worse, there's a lot of reminders of like Franmil Reyes, and Franmil Reyes had seasons where he's hitting 30 plus. It's just the volatility of the profile can cause a guy like that to also, taper down quickly. But when it's going as well as any power hitter in the game. So he's one of those where it's just a wait and see. And because of that, and because of the lack of defensive value, I put him at 15. But that's also more of a testament to the players that the Marlins have acquired that kind of pushed him back a little bit, because you can tell the Marlins have had a clear focus on adding a lot of middle infielders. And if you're a middle infielder that's putting together some solid offensive numbers, I'm going to probably give you the edge over the guy that has to mash to have a consistent big league role.
Yeah.
Speaking of middle infielders, Carter Johnson checks in at 14, who they just drafted in the second round, went over slot to get him. And, they used the savings from the PJ Morlando pick to get Carter Johnson, 1.2 million over slot. So like they really liked Carter Johnson. A lot of scouts do. It's a sweet swing from the left side. It's still just trying to figure out what the ultimate archetype is going to be. Because I see average hit and I see like potentially average power, but there's some scouts out there that think he's going to fill out more, and it's going to be average hit, maybe above average power, or fringy hit and above average power, whatever it may be. I do think he ultimately moves to third, and that might just naturally result in him bulking up a little bit more and being more of the power over hit guy. He's just another one of those guys where I want to see a bit more. I know the numbers in low A don't look great, but I watched all the ABs, and like the fact that they threw a high school kid straight into low A to challenge him like that, I think it's probably a testament to how they feel about him as just makeup wise and way he goes about his business. And if you watch the ABs, he didn't look like some kid that was just getting overmatched. It just was a challenge to get his best swings off, because you're seeing stuff that you've never seen before. But I think this is another guy that could climb very quickly up these rankings with a good start to the year. I'm still just trying to figure out which way you have like the baseline here, and like which way does the template skew? Is it towards the hit over power and sticking at shortstop, or the power over hit and sticking at third, or 50s across the board? I could kind of see it going any which way.
Defensively, you think he can survive at both? Like, as currently constructed, does he look like a future MLB shortstop?
Not yet, but I think he has the ability to
do
that. Like, you know, I think the arm's enough, like good enough. I think he's
because like you see where I'm getting at though. Like if you said no, then that probably shows your hand as to like which direction you go, I guess. But no, I mean like it probably makes it an even more difficult like conversation to have, or at least question to raise, if you think he can be serviceable at both.
That's the interesting thing, and the beautiful thing about his progression and where he's at is like go 18. Play and see what happens. Right? Like go play and we'll get more clarity. But I do think ultimately, just because of the way he moves and everything, it's not as much of like he's incapable of playing short. And this is always something that kind of gets misconstrued as well. I think people say, oh, he might move off the position. It's not because he's incapable. It's just because there's going to be a guy that's better. Like how many shortstops you have out there that are just not great defenders? Usually those are going to be guys that mash so much you don't care, like a Bo Bichette before last year. But generally speaking, there's always just going to be a better defensive option that, you know, you kind of moves in deference to.
So sad that that's a precursor now. Bo Bichette before last year instead of just Bo Bichette.
Yeah, I know. I hope he bounces back this year. But like you got to mash to make it justifiable. But another guy that I'm just so excited to see at low A, like that low A team, man, I'm going to be driving up to Jupiter all the time. Like,
oh yeah,
I can't wait.
It's a great spot up here. I like it.
Yeah. Number 13, Adam Mazur, a guy that you'll be calling games on the mound plenty of. And you know, I'm interested to see exactly where he fits in. Obviously, the Braxton Garrett unfortunate news there with him undergoing Tommy John makes it potentially even more wide open for Mazur to grab some innings there. He finished the year much stronger. This is another guy that, you know, I wouldn't say he was rushed. Like he was probably close to big league ready and just wasn't quite ready at the time when he got up with the Padres, and it wasn't great for him. But so it goes for so many arms. Mm-hmm. I think what he showed at the end of the year was impressive and encouraging with the Marlins in AAA, where the velo was still up there. He's a guy that, you know, the stuff is good. The slider is great. That's a nasty pitch, but he needs to execute, right? And I think when he got to the big leagues, he was starting to nibble a little bit more. And he's walking guys, and it's like, that's not what Adam Mazur does. He doesn't walk anybody. In the opening part of the season, other than like Zebby Matthews, he was up there with just about anybody in the minor leagues in terms of filling up the zone. I don't think he was trusting it when he got to the big league level. We see that happen all the time. But then he started to trust it a lot more. And the last few outings of the season, I thought were really, really encouraging from him. But, you know, I think there's definitely some gain to potentially using a heavier fastball as well. The four-seamer shape-wise is okay, but when he's getting up to 96, it's going to play above average. But if he had a sinker that he could get ground balls with and pitch to contact, that'd be great. Because again, the slider's plus, and he started to flip in the curveball a little bit more with some more confidence. So you could have a nice 4-pitch mix here and above average command, but you know, this is a guy that has to execute, and he's got to trust that he can execute.
So for the sake of my brain understanding the computation, 50 fastball, 60 slider, 50 curve, 55 command, why is he a 45 future value arm?
Yeah, that's the tough part. I just think the quality of fastball is holding him back at this point. And yeah, I could have probably put 45 plus, but the way you look at it is, okay, you have a fastball that you're hoping, you know, it's looked like it can play big league average, but at the big league level has not yet.
Right.
You have a slider that looks like it can be big league plus. That's great. And then you have a curveball that you're hoping can also play as big league average. If it's 2 average pitches and a plus pitch, what does that pitcher look like?
Right.
Probably back end guy, and he's got to execute. And for me, like 45 future value is kind of like a 5 starter.
Okay.
So that's where I was looking at it with him, but he could also be a guy that pitches his way. Like 50 for me is closer to like a solid 4 starter, potentially pushing with the ceiling of a 3 starter and the floor of a 5 starter. With the 45 future value, it's kind of decent shot at being a 5 starter. You can maybe dream on a fringe 4 starter, but also has the risk of being a swing man.
Yeah. I like watching Mazur throw the baseball because it's loose, it's whippy, it's limmy, but yet it's somehow timed up appropriately all the time. Like it's repeatable, but it's also loose enough to look athletic from a lanky guy. And those are the fun guys for me to watch. Like I love watching the physically filled out arms that just like know where everything is going at all times. But I watch like a young Sale and I'm like, everything's flying everywhere. And that's why he had some command issues at points. Like Ricky Tiedemann, I'm shocked he doesn't have more command issues. Yeah. Mazur is whippy and loose and everything goes, but it just feels a little bit more in control than your classic lanky starting pitcher.
100%. That's why I think he can execute, at the clip that you're hoping he can execute at. And that's where you feel really good about him being a 5. But yeah, I want to do a whole episode, by the way, on like the future value grades and how we go about that, because it is it's different. Like you're going to have a 45 future value out of Mazur, and then you're going to have a 45 future value Luis Cova. And like Luis Cova checks in at 12, and Cova has the upside to be an above average regular in center field, but he also has the chance of, not quite even making it to the major leagues, as is the case for any, prospect that has yet to play off the DSL. So is it really just projecting a 45 roll? No, sometimes it's just the value based on the ceiling and the floor, because they're so wide. Yeah. His value ends up, being the median value ends up being 45, but then the ceiling and floor of a Mazur being much more tight, but the ceiling is still not very high, but the floor is higher. He's also 45. So that's the interesting part of it. And usually rebuilding teams are going to target those guys further away. It feels like the Marlins did a good job of both. And I know Bendix talked about, like, the plan was always honestly to go for the lower level guys and go for the upside, but players fell into their lap and opportunities that you couldn't pass on. But Cova is a guy they signed themselves, $1.4 million in 2023. He has the projection, I think, to be a really exciting player, but it's just kind of a wait and see game with him. What I like is, relative to other DSL prospects, his floor is a little bit higher, where his chase rate was as low as anybody's in the orgs. And I think we're seeing that with the Marlins now too, more and more, where they're prioritizing swing decisions a lot more, which I love to see. But 13% chase rate this past year. Contact rates were average. The EVs are below average. I would say for his age, slightly below average. And the swing mechanics are a work in progress. Like he very much like fights himself at times. He doesn't use the lower half too much, where he'll kind of fight backwards. The back leg will collapse and the shoulders will kind of keel over. And that results in some challenges against spin. But he hit fastballs really well. Super, super patient, plus runner. I think he can be an above average defender in center. He's got plenty of room to fill out. So if he can reach closer to even just fringy power, if you have average hit plus plate discipline, fringy power plus runner, and above average defender in center, that's an above average big leaguer, in a premium spot. So you can dream on that. I've seen power grades higher for him. I don't know if I think he's more hit over power, but again, this is one of those guys where you just kind of have to wait and see which way the template goes.
When we talk about waves, I feel like, I clump certain people together, and Cova and Valor, I kind of clump together because it's that final wave is currently constructed. And this year's IFA class will join them, I think. But I look at the DSL group and the complex group, and then I look at the low A group that we're talking about, where it's Caba, it's Dillon Head, it's guys like that. Kiner Benitez is in that group. Yep. And then I look at the AA, AAA group, where it's Agustin, it's Deyvison, it's Joe Mack, it's guys like that. Like, those are the waves for me that I see, at least. Cova and Valor, the separator there that makes Cova 12 and Valor in honorable mention, plate discipline, and you feel like it's a game that probably translates into a higher floor big leaguer, I assume.
Yes. Yeah. I think the ceilings are comparable. I think Valor's gotten to the point where you're seeing him fill out a little bit more, but I think you got to give Cova time. Like, Cova just turned 18. I think Valor's already 19, which it sounds like not that much. 18 to 19 is crazy in terms of how much physical, maturation you can have there, especially when it's going to be a year at the complex where you're working directly, with a lot of coaches here that are going to push you probably even harder. And not that they don't push you in the DSL, but I think, there's expectations that shift at each level that you climb. And I think Cova just a little bit more projection from where he's currently at, but the floor is already higher. And I think a better field to hit at this point as well. So they are very similar though. And I love that you mentioned the waves in that regard, because I remember a time not that long ago where like you couldn't even go down to the DSL to find a guy that has a chance to stick in center field in the Marlins org. Like they didn't have any premium spots.
Now they have two.
And now they've got several. And I think Cova's a guy that with his approach could play his way off the complex pretty quickly.
Gotcha.
Another guy who I know, if it's up to his dad, I'm sure he'd be off the complex really quickly. But also is a guy that I think is going to skip the DSL, Andrew Salas. Was he there? Have you seen him yet? I know they introduced him. No,
I have no idea.
I've only seen some of the interviews, and it's just like one of those guys that you probably talk to and you forget that he's 16. Like it's ridiculous how well spoken he is and just ahead of his years. But that's kind of the Salas way, right? Like they're raised on a complex. Like his brother Ethan, and of course former Marlins, and Jose. I'm pretty sure their father like built a complex where big leaguers will train at, and obviously these kids are homeschooled, and that's all they do is play baseball. They eat, sleep baseball. Whoa. And you can tell by just watching Andrew Salas, like the fundamentals are so ahead of his years. They had him play in the Venezuelan Summer League. So it's not going to be quite as talented as the Winter League because the major leaguers are, over playing in the major leagues or in the minor leagues and everything like that. But it's still a bunch of 27, 28, 29, 30-year-olds like Wilson Ramos. He was playing against Wilson Ramos.
Really?
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah, there were some other funny names out there. I think Gorkys Hernandez was out there.
Nice.
But he's playing against guys a decade older than him on average. And, he understandably did not perform that well. But the fact that he was on the field and playing shortstop and predominantly center field, I think says a lot about the polish. The tough part is, like, I was venting about this to you, is just like how difficult it is to assess these international free agents. And I think people that have like super strong takeaways on international free agents, unless you are literally a scout doing that and it's your job and you've seen these kids, every single day. And even then it's almost impossible because you imagine how many $3-4 million deals are given out and these guys barely even make it to low A. It's really hard. Salas is too polished to not like, that's why the floor is so much higher relative to other guys, right? He's a switch hitter who the actions are already so advanced in center field where he already looks so comfortable there. And even the actions are pretty good at short. I like him better in center personally at this stage. I think his speed is above average where he can actually close in, but he just looks a little bit more natural there. But like we talk about how much like perfect game rankings change for kids that are sophomores before their senior year. And like,
right.
You're talking about 16-year-olds, like guys that would be high school sophomores. Like if you did it again in 2 years, what would the international rankings be then? It would be different. I can guarantee you that. So that's the hard part. But what was nice is it was a rare occasion where I was actually able to watch a ton of at-bats from an international free agent because he played in that Venezuelan league. His approach is way ahead of his years. I think he chased like 15% of pitches in that Venezuelan league, which is nuts. And, it is a smooth swing from both sides. It just frankly looked like he was swinging a heavy bat because he's 16 trying to catch up to 94. But what stood out to me was the mechanics are good. The comfort is there defensively. I thought the game looked a little bit quicker for him at short. He was tracking the ball nicely in center. So you have a switch hitter who already has plus plate discipline and is going to play at one or two premium spots. Like it's easy to get behind that, but I don't know if he's going to be that like superstar. I think what the Marlins paid for here was a high floor that could be average or above average tools across the board.
It's also the first 2029 ETA I think I've ever seen from you. So like that,
yeah.
It again reminds you that he's a high school sophomore and we were worried about getting our driver's license and he's worried about pitching at the complex or the DSO, wherever he may be. But it's cool how comfortable all three of those brothers are as soon as they hop into pro ball. And the fact that you can already slap a 65 future grade on the plate discipline is crazy, man. And like, there's room to blossom everywhere else.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I just think the relative floor, like the floor is obviously gonna be low for any 16-year-old IFA guy, but the relative floor is really solid for him. And I think that's where we can get like mixed up because, he's a top IFA prospect. He's a top 16-year-old. So he must have superstar potential. Not necessarily. I think this is also a guy that I think you're really valuing. He has star potential, but I think the fact that you can more confidently dream on average or above average tools across the board with all the intangibles to push it across the finish line. Yeah. That's a rare opportunity for an IFA player.
Right.
We're going to get to number 10, which is Jared Serna. But before that, another break. So we did the system not too long ago, and Serna was closer to the top 5. And because they acquired some guys, all of a sudden it shakes it up a little bit. And Here he is at number 10. It's not really much of a knock on Serna. He did slow down at the end of the year, but this is just another guy. I love the floor here. Yeah, you might not be dreaming on a superstar, but what he did last year, even before the trade, of course, was that second piece in the Jazz Chisholm trade. To be able to tap into more power, adding strength, and also very much focused on his defense at shortstop, where I have shortstop / second base or second base / shortstop, just because this is another one of those examples where he's probably going to move off of short in just because there's going to be a preferred, more, polished or savvy defensive option. But he has come a long way to where I think he can play an average shortstop. He can play a plus second base. And for a guy that's 5'7", has found out how to squeeze out every drop of his power and finds the barrel consistently. This guy has no business running an average exit velocity of 90.4 miles per hour, but that's what he ran last year. So it's not going to I don't think it's going to show itself in terms of 20 home runs, though there's guys that hit, 30 home runs that have lower average exit velocity than that. But because of his shorter levers and everything, I think it's going to show in higher BABIP, a lot of line drives, in a ton of doubles. But because he can pull the ball in the air at a decent clip, I think also upwards of 15 home runs. The question is actually the hit tool a little bit, because I think he's getting off his best swing so frequently, and he's swinging real hard that it can get a little out of control and the whiff can creep up a little bit. But I think as long as he keeps that in check, you've got a very well-rounded player here that could be a potentially above average regular at second, or a regular who can move all over the infield.
So you mentioned he hits it hard. His ability to elevate, that's borderline good, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Like that's the exciting thing there. I don't know. I'm curious to see what it looks like in AAA this year. He just had to be added to the 40-man roster, which is big, and we'll see what he looks like in Jacksonville. And he's in big league spring, so we'll see him in big league spring training games here soon.
For the AA level, he was in the 89th percentile for average exit velocity.
Yeah, like you shouldn't be there if you're 5'7", $175.
No. And to add that strength while not losing the agility at shortstop, I'd like to see him be a little bit more efficient on the base paths, but I think that's something that he'll get better at. And I know the Marlins are focusing on speed and things like that a little bit more this year in camp. And I think the approach, like, it's good, but that's something that I think you're 5'7". We talk about with like Peyton Neal's, like leverage the hell out of that, right? Like,
for sure.
Use that small strike zone and get your best swing off more consistently when it's in the zone that you want. And then, you can widen your sights a little bit more with two strikes. But this is a guy that I think is going to get up there at some point this coming season. The Marlins are going to have a good problem on their hands. Like, you've got Norby up there now. I think Xavier Edwards has got his spot. Like he's one of the mainstays there. But we're going to talk about another guy that I think surpassed Serna in terms of the prospect intrigue. That's already on the 40 and at AAA. And you already have some other middle infielders in the picture there as well. So they're going to have a lot, and that's a great problem to have. I talked to some college coaches through the years to say, like, every player I recruit is a middle infielder, and then the best one wins, and then we'll put them out everywhere else. And I think that's probably what the Marlins will end up doing with some of these guys. Don't
forget about Otto Lopez too, man. You didn't mention Otto.
Yeah, one of the best defenders in the sport up the middle, like at second base. So like they've got a lot to figure out when you cross that bridge when you get there, and that's a welcomed problem, I think, for the Marlins brass.
Yep.
Speaking of, Max Acosta checks in at number 9, and I was very, very, very impressed with the changes that he made, and it's made me much more like understanding of the Jake Burger trade. Like, I don't know what the Marlins' whole process was there in terms of like, were they aggressively shopping him or whatever it may be? But if you were just doing your due diligence, and I imagine the Marlins saw what I saw with the second half here from Acosta, like, and you get offered a prospect like that, sometimes you just got to jump on it. And I imagine the Rangers may have been more willing to dangle Acosta because of the fact that he's already on the 40, and a team like the Rangers, they need every single 40 spot.
Yeah.
I think for the Marlins side of it, the Marlins must have really liked him too, because they've already acquired a handful of prospects that take 40-man spot that are not going to be on the MLB roster this coming season. So you're already kind of clogging up, to a degree. Clog's the wrong word because they're all exciting young players, but you're already filling up the 40-man roster with prospects that aren't going to be there and you know how much Bendix likes to churn and burn the the reliever wire or whatever it may be and utilize an open 40 spot. So you got to really like a guy to add him to the 40 as a prospect or acquire him knowing he's going to take that spot. And the more I dug in, like, he totally changed just about everything with this batted ball data. He adjusted his setup. He used to be a leg kick guy that would go up, and we talk about this a lot. There's guys that have the leg kick and they gather and they can stay in it. And there's guys who have the leg kick where it's up and I push out. And he was lift the leg up, push out. And when you push out, body leads the swing, barrel drags, you lose the strength, you lose the bat speed, and a lot of
the back hip. The back hip is your favorite term in baseball. Use it when it's available.
You got to engage that back hip. But it's not even that; it's just balance, right? So you start to lunge towards the ball. The ball is coming. You don't want to head towards an object that's coming at you 95 miles per hour. You want to be where you want to be as that.
Give yourself as much time as possible. Yeah.
And then on top of that, the bat's drag and all that good stuff. So he ditches the leg kick. He starts a little bit more inverted with his foot to kind of engage. And you'll see before a pitch, like Bobby Witt Jr. does this, where you see a slight little like turn inwards where he's legitimately engaging his back hip to like just stimulate it. Acosta kind of does that now too, where you can see him turning inward, but now he first went to like a more subdued leg kick, and then he went to the toe tap. I identified, I went through every single game and then waited until I found the game where he changed the mechanics. That was roughly July 10th. From July 10th onward, he was a different hitter. And here are the numbers on it. First 58 games, he had a 655 OPS. This was a double A, by the way. Yeah. So it's nice to have the same sample at the same level. First 58 games, a 655 OPS with an average exit velocity of 87.7 miles per hour and a chase rate of 27%. The subsequent 48 games at double A, he had an OPS of 899, an average exit velocity of 90 miles per hour, and a chase rate that dwindled below 15%. Some may say, oh, well, maybe he was just getting acclimated to double A. Yeah, but you're not going to cut your chase rate in half and up your exit velocity by more than 2 miles per hour and improve against all pitch types.
Yeah.
The chase is what really set it in stone for me because, again, if you're drifting towards the baseball, it's getting on you quicker, your head's moving more, and you're just not going to pick pitches up nearly as well.
So I was going to ask why a swing change results in that much better a plate discipline, and the answer is he has more time to think and more time to react.
More time to react.
The finger is going to be everything. Yeah.
And less head movement, right? You're lifting your leg up, your eyes are moving. It's a lot more, but then also, you feel like you can see the ball longer and it comes to you. This guy was a prized IFA signing, $1.65 million in 2019, and it was slow out of the gate. What I love too is you have that tangible adjustment. He goes nuts in the second half, and then he continues that in the fall league where he put up crazy numbers there. 46% hard hit rate. It's kind of like he's bigger than Serna, but it's kind of the Serna conversation where it's like that hard hit rate's up there with like some top end power guys. It's not going to result in 25 home runs, but it can result in 15 with a ton of doubles. And with the plate discipline now looking like it's above average, I love everything across the board there where I think it's going to be 50 hit, above average plate discipline, probably 45 game power from a home run perspective, but probably a ton of doubles. He's become a really solid base stealer. And the defense at short, I think, is even better than Serna's, where I actually think he can play a slightly above average shortstop. The instincts are great. If you move him to second, comfortably plus second baseman. So he's probably, for me, the most underrated prospect in the system because the way it finished, people want to see it, see him do it more. When you look at the year numbers, it's an OPS slightly under 800. So you're like, oh, well, the numbers aren't that great. I think he's going to get off to a really hot start in AAA. And I think he's a candidate to be one of their best performers in AAA.
Cool.
Number 8, not going to have a ton more to add on him, so probably going to be a little bit quicker. Probably top of the list of guys I'm excited to see as he's healthy, PJ Morlando. Marlins first-round pick, 18th overall. He had a very up and down pre-draft process where he was regarded as one of the more intriguing hit power guys in the high school class, and then unfortunately just started to struggle with the hit tool. He spread out super wide, and I think it resulted in more whiff, and the Marlins have been trying to kind of get him back to his roots, and I think they have, and they feel good about it. But then, of course, the back goes in the first game. So I had to wait and get that right. Seems like he's going to be good to go. But I think the bat speed is really impressive. Just being able to dig back into the other videos, like this guy won the high school home run derby for a reason, and like there's some explosive power from the left side here. It's more like straight line speed than like quickness. I don't think it's going to be 25 bags, but when he's underway, he can motor. So the Marlins are going to try him in center. I think ultimately it's going to be in a corner where that speed, will be helpful. But I like it from a value and an underrated value, just being able to go first to third, things like that, even if it's not a big base stealing side of things. It was hard for me to grade the hit tool given the kind of volatility of that side of things, and haven't had a big enough sample size to see, what the new adjustments look like. But I think you can dream on potentially close to average hit and above average power from the left side with some sneaky wheels. Like there's plenty of potential here. And I kind of see like that Kerry Carpenter light if it all works out, but it's just kind of a wait and see game with him.
Thing that might expedite that process. You've got 195 here. I saw his draft weight was at 198. Christina DeNicola, who's the Marlins beat writer for MLB.com, did a feature on Morlando a couple weeks ago. He's up to 220. PJ Morlando. He's put on. What?
I just throw him in a corner then. Like
throw him in a corner. He's 6'3", 220, and he's already won a high school home run derby when he wasn't 220. Like there's a chance for crazy pop here.
It might be plus. Like I'm saying this, like take these grades with a grain of salt because like
we've seen one game.
I know he did in that one game I was watching crush a ball foul. Like crushed. I think it was like 108, like just rocketed. But it's a wait and see. But if he's put on that much strength and he likes to get after it in the weight room, like that's a guy that absolutely could push towards plus power. Put him in a corner and, if the speed is still there where it's even just average, he could turn into, a decent defender there.
Yep.
This is the guy that I'm going to be driving to Jupiter the most to go see, I think. Dillon Head. And I know you got to be pumped as a Chicagoland guy that you've been excited about since we were talking about him as a Padres draft pick and a guy that was a top 100 prospect for us. And I still think has the talent to be that, but like can't keep him in the top 100, unfortunately, after the hip issue with so many other prospects emerging, but a guy that I could expect to get right back there. And you notice the future value shift. He jumps up to 50 here. Morlando was 45 plus because I think the floor ceiling combination here is really fascinating. The defense here, and I know the Marlins were really impressed with the defense even before he got hurt. And this was dealing with a hip issue. The Marlins were like impressed with how much ground he covered in center field and how natural he looked out there. And I saw it. Like it was amazing to see the closing speed. The reads got better and better. They could get they're getting to the point where if his reads can get to above average, this guy could be a plus defender in center field. He was playing with a lot of different setups and stuff. I do think some of that was probably because the fact that his hip wasn't feeling great. And he's like, why am I pushing out of it? Or like, why can't I get into my base as much? Because when we saw him in the brief 2023 pro debut, he was selective. He was popping exit velocities of like 108 miles per hour. And then in 2024, before he went down, the chase was higher. He was playing with all these different feels. I think you almost have to throw it out. So I just can't wait to see what it's going to look like because he's healthy. He's ready to go. And I think you have the potential for above average hit, sneaky pop, 70 wheels, and plus defense in center field. It's a really exciting player.
Dude, have you seen some of the videos that were tweeted out of Dillon Head when he first got to camp in early February? I mean, he does not look like the lanky kid that was playing in Lake Elsinore anymore. Like he looks a bit more filled out too. And that's really exciting. I didn't get a glimpse at him today, but I mean, if he's a bit more filled out, just top half and bottom half too, and he's still a 70 runner, this is, I'm with you. Like off day, you know what? Thursday off day, I'll go to Jupiter with you. Let's go.
Let's do it. No, that's an interesting point you bring up, especially for the young, like lanky, skinnier kids. You never want to have an injury. Injury is always going to be bad.
Right.
But sometimes a residual benefit of it is you end up strengthening all these other parts of your body through the rehab process that you maybe were neglecting. I'm even experiencing this. Like, I'm not a guy that ever liked to go to the weight room, especially now.
You and Dillon Head are actually built pretty
similar if you think about it.
Yeah.
But I had to get my left shoulder fixed, right? I'm super weak across my body, and now I'm doing PT, and my whole body feels 10 times better because I'm working out everything else. So, like, you imagine that on a professional setting? Like, this is a guy that probably, as you mentioned, added strength across the board. Not that he wasn't going to anyways, but it's a lot more fixated on the small muscles and things like that, where people are like, oh, are you worried about the speed or whatever? now. I'm not worried about the speed of a 19-year-old, 20-year-old. Like,
Right.
I know the hip is weird, but I think with where he's at, like usually kids at that point are just relying on natural ability. Now you actually get your body in a place where, it's probably never actually been physically. You're going to see, I think, different results. And that's a big like guys come back from Tommy John throwing harder, not because of like the UCL being stronger. It's because their entire arm and body is stronger from the work. Like that's another perfect example of that. So I'm interested to see the approach because he was way more patient in 2023 than in 2024. We're still dealing with micro samples in both, but I do think this guy could be a comfortably plus defender. And again, you don't just pop a 108 by accident as a, I think he was closer to 18 at the time. Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if the power ticks up even more now that he's, strengthened all those different areas.
Interesting. Also, I was joking. You're probably built a little bit closer to Sandy than Dillon Head.
Yeah. Similar work ethic there too, physically, I think. Number 6 is Joe Mack. And what a year it was for Joe Mack. And I think he's enjoying as much helium as like anybody in the system right now. It's funny how like it sometimes happens delayed. A couple outlets start to push him, and then everyone's like, oh, wait, let me dig deeper. And oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. And now you're seeing him even pop up on some top 100 lists. I get it, because if you value catching defense, this is a guy that absolutely fits the bill of that everyday catcher who's a plus defender and runs into enough home runs. He improved across the board this past year. We talk about how much of a nightmare it is to hit in the Southern League, and this guy popped 24 home runs. I think 22 of them were in the Southern League. He's a plus defender, but because of his arm, I think he threw out 34% of base stealers. Because of his receiving, which grades out if you look at the advanced metrics as plus. If you watch plus, you could get a little bit better at framing the top, but like it's the least important area to frame. And on top of that, made improvements to just be able to run into more home runs and destroys fastballs. Needs to improve against the breaking balls. If he can improve against breaking balls, maybe that hit tool inches closer to 40. But this is a guy that could be a 35 grade hitter who crushes fastballs and hangers. And that's enough to be, an above average catcher. We talk about Cal Raleigh all the time and how he's one of the best catchers in Major League Baseball. And he'll probably finish his career a 230 hitter, right? Like Joe Mack could be that like Cal Raleigh light that you're thrilled to have. But I think it also is important to remember this was a cold weather kid that was very slow out of the gate, but like a cold weather prep catcher. Like that is the quintessential, like, don't draft me in draft models, right? Like, and patience has prevailed here. He was 21 years old doing what he did. My only concern is the breaking balls side of things. But when you're as good as he was against fastballs, 1,000 OPS against all fastballs, and then 1,100 OPS against 93 plus, like you're going to be able to survive off that. The OPS cuts in half against spin. So again, that's something he's going to have to find. And to me, it was a mechanical thing. He starts with his hands really high. They travel a long way, and you could see him kind of drift ahead and the hands get too far behind him. And I think it makes it hard to like have the desired path to be able to catch those breaking balls. But again, he's got plenty of time to improve there. And if he has a 600 OPS against breaking balls, he'll be fine. But the plus defense makes him almost a guarantee to be a backup catcher, especially because he's going to be able to run into home runs too.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the year by year, and you mentioned like it took him a little bit. 13 doubles and 6 homers in 120 games in Beloit in 2023. So the home run total in a very comparable number of plate appearances, 503 in 23, 535 in 24. So we're talking about a 5-game difference, 120 versus 125. 6 to 24 in the home run total, but 19 to 54 in the extra base total. Oh, like this guy went from
30 doubles.
He had 30 doubles. He had 13 doubles in 120 games in Beloit. So it's not just the homer. It's like the gap-to-gap power. It's just finding alleys. Like he was exponentially better at that. And I feel like exponentially is an overused word, but like this is
by
exponentially.
Definition.
Yes.
By definition, it's like exponentially. The EVs are above average, and I think there's room for some more. Like there's still some more room for strength. Like I think the biggest thing that I want to see is the plate discipline, and it got better. Like he cut the chase from last year or from 2023, which was encouraging to see. Cut it a little bit, but like I think that's an easier fix than like, okay, let me be better against all pitch types that aren't fastballs. Although he does hit changeups well, which is big for a lefty. But if he can just be a bit more selective, especially against spin, then that'll take a lot of pressure off the hit tool. And if you walk and you run into 20 to 25 home runs as a plus defender, you're going to be an above average catcher at the big league level for a long time.
Yep.
Number 5, Robby Snelling. This is a guy that really seemed to benefit from the change of scenery. And it's not a specific knock on the Padres, but I just think seemed like a fresh start for him. Getting out of that situation where, for whatever reason, he just was not throwing well there. After the trade, which we were shocked that the Marlins were able to get him in that deal, in the Tanner Scott trade, but it just seemed like everything was playing better. It's also a guy that sneaky was just 20 years old last year, and the free fall on prospect list was kind of surprising to me. Like, I understand the velo was not totally there. The fastball was not performing the same way, and he wasn't throwing strikes quite at the same clip. But like, by the end of the year, he still threw all 3 of his pitches for a strike at a 65% clip individually. So that's still pretty damn good. There's not really that clear plus pitch. And I can understand how that's restrictive to like dreaming on the upside, but this guy's such a high probability back end arm. And then you think about a 6'3", 210-pound, incredible athlete on the mound. Why can't he find another tick or two? I think he very easily can. And then what's also underrated with him is the built-in deception. I sent you a video earlier this week.
Yeah, dude. You don't see it. And the thing is, when you watch from a center field camera, when you watch that typical, like, okay, a telecast is showing me the pitcher delivering the ball to the hitter, it looks normal. It looks kind of cookie cutter. And then you see the home plate view that you sent me, and like, that's not cookie cutter at all.
No. Because I was wondering, the only reason why I went home plate view there was, why is this 4-seam fastball at 92 miles per hour getting a 22% in zone whiff rate, which is really solid?
Because you can't see the ball until it's coming off his fingertips.
No, and he throws the glove at you first, and you just know, and the whiff rate went up and up and up as the season progressed. And over his final 10 starts, fastball in zone whiff rate was 31%. And that was and like, just for reference, like average in the Southern League was about 15%. So nearly double. Nearly doubling the in zone whiff rate on the fastball at 92. Imagine he finds another tick here. I think that it will help the breaking ball immensely too, because I think it just got a little big on him. So sharpen the breaking ball a little bit more. The fastball starts to play closer to above average. You could have 3 above average pitches with plus command. If again, that needs to take another step forward. I think he's just too athletic to not have the command at that clip. You're looking at a guy that could be as good as a number 3. I think the most realistic scenario is a really solid 4 who eats a ton of innings. Yeah. And the floor just seems like a good 5.
Snelling and Nick York are the 2 poster boys of this industry being a what have you done for me lately game, where like you're so high and then for some reason you have a bad 3 months and then everybody pops off. But I'm with you. The rejuvenation of Robby Snelling after the trade, as soon as he got over to Pensacola and Jacksonville, was a sight for sore eyes, because this guy was as fun to watch as any pitcher in minor league baseball in 2023. And the fact that, he didn't follow that up in 24 with as successful a season was unfortunate, but there's no denying that 23 is still totally in the tank for 2025. And I saw him doing some band work. I didn't get to see him throw, but he might be checking in above 210. Like, he looks the part of a 4-star linebacker.
Yeah. Which is another reason why I won't count out an extra tick being in there. Right? And just to put it in perspective, final 8 appearances of the year, which included 1 at the AAA level. And these were after the trade.
Yeah.
42 innings, a 3.64 ERA, a 2.92 FIP, 27% K rate, 6.8% walk rate. Like,
that's Snelling. Like, that's Robby Snelling.
That's like what I think you could, feel comfortable with him being, and then you can dream on more than that.
Yeah.
Number 4 is a guy that's all about dreaming, and probably on the pitching side, the guy I'm most eager to just see what it looks like this coming season. Noble Meyer checks in, and this was a tough comparison, right? Because you know what you're getting with the Snelling, whereas a Noble Meyer, there is reliever risk just implied with a 6'5" right-hander who had velocity fluctuations and a funky delivery and all that good stuff. But the makeup is so impressive with Meyer. And the potential stuff wise is just so tantalizing that he gets the edge here. And there's a guy that, like, as a prep arm in the first year, you got to kind of take it first full season. You can take it with a grain of salt. I do wonder if he was dealing with something. I have no idea, but like the velo fluctuations were just the biggest concern for me because, you'd see him some outings as high as 95 over 85 pitches. Like, and there was a direct correlation to where the velo was at and how he threw, both from just a strike throwing perspective and just performance perspective. But like one of his last starts, I think his last start in low A, 5 innings, 1 hit, 11 Ks, and his fastball average 95.1. His last start of the season, where he actually was solid, but 4 1/3 innings, he averaged 91.5 miles per hour over 82 pitches. He struck out 7 and only allowed 1 earned run, but just a big fluctuation there. And I know that was the last appearance of the year, but there was also some in between that where it was 91, and then there was others where it was 94, 95. He's very unique from a release perspective. There's a disgusting potential with that slider to be like one of the best pitches in the org. And the changeup, like I think you were with me when we watched him flip him last year on the backfields, right? Were you with me then?
I was with you.
We're watching him throw these changeups before the season. We're like, whoa, he's throwing a bullpen. He's talking to the pitching coaches, and like you could just see the feel for it. And he went out on the field and live and threw it. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then it just wasn't quite there for him during the regular season. So with his work ethic and his projection, like I'm very eager to see what it looks like, because if he found some things this offseason, he could be a rocket ship. But, there's also just the concern that he won't throw enough strikes. He walked 18% of batters last year.
Yeah. That tandem, and we're going to get to Thomas White. Obviously, you haven't heard about him yet, but like that tandem, I mean, they've got back-to-back years, it feels like, in drafting where they've kind of nailed the first 2 picks that they have to offer, with Meyer and White in 23, and then it was, Morlando and Carter Johnson in 24. I'm curious, and like I know he's a guy that a lot of people in Jupiter are fascinated about, and a lot of people in Miami are fascinated about. That slider's got to be one of the best sliders in minor league baseball, like just based on a shape thing and based on like where it is at that young of an age. Like that's probably going to be, and it's not, Job yet, but Job is also the best pitching prospect in baseball. Yeah. Like I think it's probably leading tier 2 in terms of sliders. Yep.
100%. Because no matter what the TrackMan machine spits out at you, the angle and the length and the free flowing arm, like it's so tough. But that's also what makes the changeup nasty. And the in zone whiff numbers were ridiculous. It's just he didn't have the consistency with it. Yeah. Opponents at 165 against him. It's the same conversation that we have all the time where Noble Meyer's biggest challenge is going to be Noble Meyer. Mm-hmm. It's not going to be whoever's standing in the box, because that fastball can get to 95, or it can sit 95, can get to the upper 90s. But even if he's 93, it's going to play from that slot. The slider is potentially plus, and he's flashed a changeup that can be a solid pitch as well. You just can't walk 18% of batters. Obviously, that's not going to work. The good thing is the fallback with him is potentially elite high leverage arm. If in the worst case scenario, I think just a really solid reliever. But we have multiple years of working on things before we get there, because he's just 20. He's a prep righty. And I still think he showed some encouraging things last year.
Yep.
Number 3, the guy you fist pumped, Starlyn Caba. He should get the start in low A. He got a taste of it at the end of last year, acquired in the Jesus Luzardo deal. Guy that if you've been listening to the call-up, we liked a ton when he was in the Phillies org. So it's funny, a couple guys in this that the Marlins have picked up via trade were guys that we've been talking about when they were with the previous orgs. But Caba, what endeared me to him when I was sending you videos and getting him on your radar before the trade and before you were hired to be the Marlins radio voice, was the defense, but also the blend of feel to hit and approach.
Yeah,
like this guy, I think, has the best plate discipline in the entire Marlins org, and on top of that, is right there with Javier Sanoja. Obviously, Sanoja's doing it at the upper levels, but also Caba was 18 last year. The blend of feel to hit and plate discipline, though, I think is in its own realm in this organization, where just nobody is chasing at a 13% clip and producing contact rates north of 90% like that. And even though he struggled in low A, those figures didn't change. The only figure that changed was he started putting the ball on the ground way more, which is just what happens when a guy's timing is a little bit off and he's a little overmatched. was 18 in low A as a switch hitter who I think in his own words said, I spent 70% of the time on the defensive side of things, 30% of the times on the offensive side of things. So like, I'm sure the Marlins say, you're phenomenal defensively. Let's get that closer to 50-50 here and let's see how things go. But I think it's a testament to how much pride Starlyn Caba takes in his defensive shortstop. I think he's one of the best defensive shortstops in the minor leagues. Like,
yeah, you can't project a Gold Glove, but like he does have Gold Glove potential at shortstop. And if you can get that guy at 18 years old, I mean, you're cooking with gas, partner. But like the fact that you can say that an 18-year-old has the best plate discipline in the organization, A, is crazy. Yep. B, it's what I fall in love with guys at the younger level when you introduce me to them, like a Caba, like a Jesus Mate, guys that don't feel this overwhelming need to hit their way out of the DSL. Instead, they're just going to mature their way out of the DSL. Yep. And it's like, hey, this is probably too easy for me. Let's go to the complex. Those are the guys that I immediately latch onto at this young of an age. My question is, you've got 30 future game power.
Yeah.
Like, what do you feel like the best outcome of his home run total could be? Because he's so young, but he also slugged under 300 last year.
Yeah, I just don't think it's his identity as a hitter too. Like when I build him,
does that mean 10 or does that mean 5?
Probably between 5 to 10.
Oh, nice. Give me the English teacher answer where it's like, yes, it's somewhere in between.
I'd say like the thing is he'll surprise you and he'll sneak one out here or there, you know, and like the thing is if he can elevate a little bit more, and we saw him do it at the complex, and then you know, low A, it was just way harder for him. Gun to my head, I'd probably say closer to 5. Okay. But like, look at Luis Arias and what he's able to do from a production standpoint. And I don't think he's going to be that insane bat to ball wise, but also Arias is very aggressive. So you can almost kind of offset those to a degree. With the defensive value that you're getting, it's crazy. And there's a switch hitter. It's also crazy where you're not going to have to worry about splits too much either, where you're going to get the consistent, strong plate discipline and consistent bat to ball. I do think that there's enough impact in there potentially to just compile doubles. And like, I was expecting the average exit velocity would be lower. It was right at just about 84 miles per hour, which like Sal Frelick is like right there. So you assume he grabs another tick or two and he's at 85, 86 miles per hour. He could even have a little bit more in the tank than that. It's really just all about the launch angle. The average launch angle was 5 degrees. So I think he was and this is so common with the bat to ball oriented guys. I'm just trying to spray it, right? Like I'm flat swing, bat to ball, kind of playing fungo with it. And that's great. But like Arias, one of the best bat to ball guys, if not the best in Major League Baseball, has found a way to do that while also having loft, which is a really tough push and pull. But I think Caba can do that. The thing is, if he doesn't totally do that, he's a plus runner who's going to beat out a ton of balls. You know, I think that he chops into the ground or whatever it may be. So like for Marlins fans, like you could kind of get that Louis Castillo type of vibe where he's just going to, you know, the expected stats are going to suck sometimes maybe, but like it's because an expected batting average on a chopper in the ground is, you know, 0-10 for a lot of guys, but not for Caba, who's already halfway to first by the time he's done with his swing. So that's why I think the floor is so high with him, but I still think there's enough potential for gap to gap doubles and triples, sneak out 5 homers. And if you're playing elite defense at shortstop, which you know he's already going to do that, and you're walking, which you know he's going to do that. Like he walked way more than he struck out this past year. I have a hard time imagining that he's going to be anything shy of just a big league regular. But I think, you know, if he can spray the ball all over and hit a lot more line drives than ground balls, I think we could see a well above average regular at a premium spot.
The only thing that jumps out to me in what you just said was, thank goodness we didn't have expected stats for like Ichiro and Luis Castillo and Juan Pierre and guys like that. Yeah, like that would have really upset me.
Yeah. I mean, like there's just guys that are going to outperform that, especially I think that the Woba, ex-Woba stuff will love Caba though because of how much he's going to walk. And he's a guy that absolutely leverages a smaller strike zone. So yeah, I think the key is just get the ball in the air a little bit more, but it's going to be fun to see.
Yeah.
Number 2, Agustin Ramirez, who should be up at the big league level, hopefully not too long after the start of the season. We'll see. He finished the year in AAA, put up good numbers there. We've talked about Agustin a lot because I think his track is very unique and it gets overlooked at times, where he was kind of a unsung guy to a degree at points where I think he was overlooked. And multiple years of the complex, and then has this breakout in 23 where, he flies through several levels. And then in 24, he's already up at AAA.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no questioning the bat. The blend of power and contact rates is pretty crazy. Like, for a guy that was in his age 22 season last year to produce what he produced, like, he had and by the way, 90th percentile exit velocity of 108 miles per hour, which was right next to Deyvison De Los Santos. That in itself is wild.
Yeah.
Another guy that dismantles fastballs, against four seamers specifically. 360, 460, 740, good for 1200 OPS basically. Against sinkers, not quite as good. And it's because basically anything running downwards, he seems to have a little bit more trouble with. And it's a little bit of the path where he seems to have no problem catching four seamers on a path where he can have loft. But based on his swing path, it seems like he tends to catch those breaking balls and heavier fastballs at the wrong angles where he's catching it a little too deep and it just seems to go into the ground. The average launch angle on batted balls, 95 plus miles per hour on four seamers, 17 degrees. The average launch angle on batted balls, 95 plus miles per hour on everything else, 3 degrees. So I say this because he hit 25 home runs last year across every level. And that's with the challenges against, in terms of elevating secondaries.
So what you're saying is he's scratching the surface of who he can be offensively.
I think so, because if it was a situation where like Joe Mack, the whiff rates skyrocket against secondaries, I'd be like, ugh. His contact rates are pretty much the same against all pitch types.
It's just trajectory of contact.
It's trajectory. Yeah. And, you don't want to sell out for the lift because he hits the ball so hard that like he can hit hard ground balls that get through. So, and that's what he did. Like it wasn't terrible against sliders. He put up a 630 OPS. That's like, if you do that at the big league level, that's roughly the big league average. So if you pulverize fastballs and have a 630 OPS against sliders, you're fine. Cutters, 765 OPS. Changeup, 800 OPS. Curveballs, who no one has good numbers against, and you don't even see that many curveballs anymore, 700 OPS. Like, the numbers aren't bad. It's just the batted ball data is not quite as good. He's clearly can get to them. It's just, can you get to them at the right angles? If he does, I easily see 30 plus home runs. Again, this is a guy that had a 90th percentile exit velocity of 108 miles per hour. Also, to circle back and gas up Maximo Acosta, 46% hard hit rate for a guy that has plus raw power basically is the same as Acosta, who has average or above average raw power. That shows you how frequently he was finding the barrel in the second half. Which is nuts. I think, again, continues to get overlooked. The thing is the defense. And I know my guy Eli Sussman is like baffled that I think he can stick it at catcher and be a 40 grade defender and be fine. And I know I think he literally tweeted, like, it baffles me that evaluators out there have him as a potential catcher.
That word cuts. That word cuts deep.
But I get it, because Eli watches as much as anybody, man. And like Eli, but Fish on First, if you're a Marlins fan that somehow has found this and doesn't know about Fish on First, which is somehow impossible, keep up with what they're doing. Like, nobody. I know Eli watched all of Andrew Salas's Venezuelan League games as well. Like, I get it. If you're watching the games, and watching Ramirez boot balls, you're saying, how is this guy going to be a catcher? And you're watching, a guy steal on him all day. I get it. But he has caught less than 150 games above the complex. That's how fast he's flown through the minor leagues because of the bat. But 150 games above it's a different game catching at the complex versus low A, high A, double A, triple A. It's so much faster, so much more responsibility. There's so much more at hand to deal with. And when you look at the fundamentals, technically he's gotten a lot better. Like, in terms of the technical aspect of his receiving, he actually is, I think, getting closer to grading out as average. Over, if you look at a sample of 100 pitches, he actually grades out okay. The problem is the misses are terrible, where it's like, I'm whiffing and it's in the backstop, but then he's going to present 10 good strikes. So it's like, and then he's going to have one that takes him the other way. So it's very polarizing, which I think skews it. But we'll see when he gets to the big league level. And if you look at some of the like the stats that aren't public, like he doesn't grade out as bad as it looks. It's just the bad is so bad at this point. But I think that's because he has not caught very much. It's 140 something games above the complex. He has an above average arm, but his transfer is slow. I think those things can get better, especially from a guy that can steal 20 bags.
Yeah,
so 22 bags on 24 tries. I know you were sitting on that.
No, I wasn't, but like I appreciate that you brought it up. And if you didn't deploy it next, I was going to bring it up before we moved on to number one. I will say, I had no idea, frankly, that number of games caught was that low. Like that took me by surprise that he was at fewer than 150 games caught, which makes me think that he's very he's very early in his catching maturation, and that has me very optimistic about that.
Well, you don't need him to be a 50 glove. You just need him to be a 40. And I talked to some people that I trust as much as anybody in terms of like the catching nuance.
Yeah, art of catching. Yeah,
the art of catching. And they see a 40. Like he can receive his way to a 40 and be there. And I think you look at what like Adrian Del Castillo is potentially doing. I know they've got Gabby Moreno there, but like what Del Castillo provides as a bat and then passable enough defense, like that's a pretty valuable player now for them. I think with Ramirez, like if he's a 40 defender, the bat is so freaking good where if he's hitting 30 home runs and even if he's hitting 25 and the average, the swing decisions got better and better and better as the season progressed. It's even giving you some value on the base paths.
Yeah.
I think it's really easy to forget how weird his path has been and how little opportunity he's had to really develop as a catcher. And then he was also traded. Yeah. You have different philosophies catching wise in every org. So I do think
and a different staff you're working with.
Yeah. A lot to handle. I feel good about, and all he worked on this offseason, I'm sure was the defensive side of things. So I think he can get there and be passable. And it's all he really needs. And I think he's the future for the Marlins behind the dish. And he's probably a guy that you're not going to have catch. It's not as essential to have him catch every single day or like most days where he shares a little bit more with a Joe Mack, who's a plus defender, right? Like you could have a very unique situation there. And then he's playing some first or DH or whatever. So he's going to be a good big leaguer just off the bat alone, but I think the glove can be good enough.
Got you.
I'm calling my shot here at number one. Thomas White's going to be one of the best pitching prospects in baseball by the end of the year. I can't wait to see him throw at camp, and I'm going to be waiting for the text from you where it's like, oh, Thomas White hit like 99 today or whatever it may be. Going back and watching the starts, because if you look at the data, it's really good, but the whiff rates don't do the stuff justice. He has that long, like whippy arm action that does result in, I think, some challenges in terms of repeating the timing and filling up the zone. But at the same time, it also creates a really tough look for hitters. And I think the fastball just seems to get on hitters quick. He averaged 95 on the fastball this past year, and it's high spin. It's not as ridiculous high carry, but it's high spin. I think it just explodes through home plate, and hitters were consistently late on it. Then he tweaked his breaking ball, and I think that changed a lot, where he was throwing a little bit of a slower curve that was like a sweeping curve. He tweaked it to a sweeper and at a tick harder. And that pitch was devastating left on left, but also had the depth, and he commanded it way more naturally to bury it on righties. And then the changeup, it's not as consistent for him as the new sweeper, but he still landed it for a strike over the course of the year at a 65% clip. And that pitch really fades as well and can be disgusting. I think we're looking at 3+ pitches here where you're just waiting on the command getting to average. But also, I think there's room for more velo. He's 6'5", 210. Early reports are that he's running it up a little bit higher now out of camp. If that fastball pushes to 65, 70, this guy could be one of the best pitching prospects in baseball. But I think the changed sweeper, where he's more naturally locating it, and it was dominant for him, and then the changeup feel just being there over the course of the season, I really like where he's at. And by the way, over the final 10 games where you could really have the clear-cut shift in the shape of the breaking ball, opponents hit 170 against that breaking ball with a 67% strike rate.
So fastball perception, you're thinking that because it's high spin and can explode through the zone, 95 was probably playing up to feel like 97, 98. Imagine what 97, 98 would feel like.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah.
And it just seems like the way his arm whips around, I think it just gets on you. Like
and I think it's also the way his body moves, where like his torso, you feel like his torso is a bit more involved than the typical pitcher, but that's because his legs are working so far down the hill. Like he feels like he uses tall to his advantage. He uses his height to his advantage. And it's kind of tall and fall, but it's also like, I'm going to push all of my weight, all of my limbs towards home plate. It's a fun delivery to watch, and I feel like it can almost feel like he's throwing himself at home plate, and then all of a sudden the ball's on you.
It is interesting. You kind of see like the body come towards you, and then the arm whips around, and then you imagine like the slider now whipping around from there, and then the changeup as well. Like it's a tunneling nightmare for hitters.
Yeah,
and I think he's got another tick or two in there. I mentioned it in last year's write up, so like. It wouldn't be surprising if those reports out of camp are true that like he really is comfortably ticking up, but he doesn't even necessarily need to because he's sitting 95, which for a lefty is 2 ticks above the big league average. But what I love is he kept righties at bay with that changeup, which righties had a 577 OPS against, and then lefties now with that being more of a true sweeper, like good luck, they hit below 150 against it. So it's 3+ pitches with room for a little bit more. If the command's even fringy, the stuff's so good that he'll still be a good starter. But if the command gets to average, I think he can be a strong number 2 at the big league level. So this guy, I think, is going to have as much helium as anybody. Definitely in the Marlins system, but I think he's going to be considered, one of the top pitching prospects in baseball by mid-season updates.
I love it.
That'll do it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed. We will be doing the Mets next. So we're going to continue to work through the NL East here. That's going to be fun. But yeah, it was cool to do this with you. Good timing where you just got down to Jupiter and, now you're going to be calling the games where several of these guys are going to be getting up there. But I know you guys are going to be doing a lot of check-ins on Marlins radio with the affiliates and everything throughout the season.
Yeah, no, it's going to be awesome. And this was phenomenal prep for me where it's like I felt like I had a decent gauge on a lot of these guys, but now I know the whole scope of these guys and I can go to camp tomorrow and see them. And it's like, okay, I know what your strong suit is. So we're good.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, the job of being able to keep up is probably as difficult as ever because of the layers and the depth that they've built. And, I think it's exciting, if you're a fan that likes to keep up with top to bottom there. So
fun challenge.
We will be talking to Jamie Arnold later this week. Guy who could very well be the number 1 pick in the draft. I think he might be off of a ridiculous start for FSU to open up the season. It's 10 punchies and 6 innings shutout. So Jamie Arnold on Friday. I think you guys are really going to enjoy that. Very pumped to talk to him. And then we'll have Mets top prospects next week, and I'll be out there in Arizona. So that'll do it. Look forward to talking to you later this week with Jamie Arnold.